Welcome back. This is Wendy from Willow Wanders and Willow Workshops. And today I want to talk about anxiety. So I've never made a video quite like this where I talk about my experience throughout my life with anxiety. And the reason why I'm making this video is because creating with my hands, whether that's watercolor painting for relaxation, creating collage fodder and making projects like mixed media art projects, or doing things like knitting and crocheting like I used to do in the past, or things like wheel pottery or sculpture, anything where I'm working with my hands and I'm touching materials. I have found that there is an absolute direct correlation with my nervous system and what it feels like to sort of exist in the world. So I'm just going to talk about my experience. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I don't study this in any way professionally. So this is truly just me off the cuff sharing with you what it's been like throughout my life to sort of suffer from anxiety and suffer from it really badly at different periods of my life, and how much art has impacted my well-being. So I've always been kind of a type A personality. I've always wanted to achieve at a very high level, and maybe that comes with having an anxious personality. I don't know. Again, I'm not a scientist. I've never studied this professionally. I just know that I am a type A personality. And I can be chill sometimes, but I can also be the kind of person that wants things to be a certain way, that wants to take the lead, that wants to achieve at a very high level. And then there's the other kind of anxiety, which just comes from outside circumstances. So things like things that are out of control, things that are out of control in the world, things, that become out of control in relationships that you have, or they're just not peaceful and they cause you stress. Those are the kind of things that would create an anxiety response in my body. And it's gotten really, really bad for me at certain points in my life. So the worst I've ever experienced it was when I was in law school. So when I was 21 years old, I went to UCLA School of Law. And I went to law school because that's what my parents really wanted me to do. And that's what I felt like I was supposed to do, because that was a pretty much, it's funny now that I think about it now, but I thought it was a guaranteed way to have a good life. It's like, you'll get your undergraduate degree, then you'll go on to law school. I never thought whether or not law was the right profession for me. I just thought, okay, I don't want to be a doctor. I don't want to cut into human bodies. I'm not really great at science. And therefore, I guess the other thing that kind of guarantees a, pretty regular stream of income would be to go to law school and become an attorney. And it's like so funny that that's what I thought when I was young. Well, I mean, it definitely had something to do with my parents. Their parents were immigrants, and it's kind of like an immigrant mentality. It's like, don't worry about what you really want to do in your life. Just worry about like what's going to give you stable income. So I remember when I was in college and about to apply to law school, talking to my dad and saying, Dad, I think this is like really a mistake. I don't really want to do this, but I think there's something that I am very interested in. I'm interested in business. I might really want to go to business school. And he was like, no, that's not a legitimate thing to do. You really should go to law school. And of course, I was very young, very impressionable. I didn't think I had other options. I, of course, just had no idea about the millions and billions of other professions that I could dedicate my life to. And I just thought, okay, if my parents think that I should do this, I'll just go do this thing. And I ended up in law school. And in the first week of law school, I just knew. I knew I was in the wrong place. I knew I had made a terrible mistake, but I didn't know how to unwind it. I had no confidence in myself that I could go out and just get a job working at any company and start from the absolute bottom, minimum wage. And that because of my personality and my skill set and my abilities, that I would have been able to work my way to the top of anything that I did. I did not have that level of self-confidence. And so I stayed in law school. I mean, I could have quit that first week. I could have said this was clearly not where I belong. I'm not interested in this. It's like the professors were speaking a foreign language. And I didn't know what else to do. I felt very, very stuck. And pretty quickly, I developed a terrible case of irritable bowel syndrome. And it was a total stress response. It was, my nervous system responding to the amount of stress hormones that were in my body at the time. And I'm not going to go into gory details about what having irritable bowel syndrome is like, but I do want to tell you this story because it is, I think, really important. I went to see a doctor at UCLA so that I could get a diagnosis and hopefully get some treatment for this irritable bowel syndrome that I had developed. And the doctor diagnosed me. He said, you've got irritable bowel syndrome. And the bad news is that we have no treatment and we have no cure. And not only that, you're going to have this for the rest of your life. And it was pretty awful having irritable bowel syndrome. And I believed this doctor at the time. I didn't know that there was any other thing that could possibly be true. And I guess I just went on about my business. I stayed in law school, but I think, probably around that time, I made a decision that I needed to take a year off of law school and see what life would be like outside of just being in school. So I took a year off. So I finished my first year of law school, and then I took a year off. And during my year off, I worked at a law firm in Los Angeles. And I also, for the first time ever, took a real art course, meaning I decided I want to study this thing and I'm going to find a teacher, a place, a studio, and I'm going to study this thing. And the first thing that I did that I had known I wanted to do was I wanted to learn how to throw pottery on a wheel. I remember when I was about 5 years old, my parents bought my first cousin a toy pottery wheel. And I remember at the time feeling in my body this just knowing, this sense that I wanted to learn how to make functional pottery on the wheel. And so taking that year off of law school immediately freed me to pursue something that I truly intuitively felt I wanted to pursue. And I joined a local pottery studio in Santa Monica, and I started taking wheel pottery, and I fell madly in love with it. By week 2, I was like, oh my gosh, I love this so much. Not only did I love throwing the pottery on the wheel, I loved being a part of an art community. It was like, I have found, what I want to do. And so I spent that next year just in that pottery studio every spare minute that I had. And I did work full time in a law firm, but then at night and on the weekend, I was in the pottery studio. And during that time, I really explored what life as an artist would be like and whether or not I could support myself just being an artist full time. And I pretty much at the time was like, I don't know how I could support myself. I don't see how this is going to work. And so I decided that I would go back to law school, but that I would still make pottery in my free time. And that I would go back to law school just so that I didn't have any regrets at all. And during the time that I was working and making pottery, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, my irritable bowel syndrome went away because it did not cause me anxiety to work at the law firm. And I was, of course, for the first time in my life, really spending a lot of time working with my hands. So that's something that I want to mention at this point is that working with your hands in any type of craft, whether it's, using paint, woodworking, knitting, pottery, anything. Just like the list is very, very long. I don't need to go into gory details about what the options are, but when you work with your hands, there are certain chemicals that are released into your body that are anti-cortisol chemicals. I believe. I think I read this. Whether it's anti-cortisol chemicals or whatever those chemicals are, your body is constantly releasing chemicals based on your environment, the feelings that you're having, certain chemicals are released. So when you're working with your hands, there are these chemicals that are released that are just very, very good for you. And so I didn't know this at the time. I never read any science at the time about what working with your hands does for you. But I somehow intuited at this point how healthy this was because I knew how great I felt. But also, I didn't know how I was going to support myself. So I went back to law school for my second year. So I took that whole gap year, made a ton of pottery, explored how could I support myself doing this, decided I don't think I could, and went back to law school. And when I went back to law school, I hatched this plan because I knew at that time, I was like, I want to be a full-time artist and I don't want to have to worry about whether I make enough money to pay the rent and buy groceries. And I thought, well, I'm 25 years old or however old I was at the time. I was more like 23 years old. And I was like, I guess I could get married. I mean, I am of marriage age and I love being in a relationship. I had many great relationships. And I was like, I guess that might be a viable option for me is find my life partner and just be really honest with them and tell them, I don't want to be an attorney. I don't want to have that kind of pressure in my life. I really just want to be an artist. And so I was like, okay, I made this decision. I'm just going to go out on a date with every single person that asks me on a date until I find the right person. And it didn't take me that long. I actually found my husband shortly after returning to law school, I believe, for my second year. Does this make sense? Maybe this doesn't make sense. Maybe it was my third year. No. It was my second year. Okay, it was my second. Anyway, now I'm getting too old to remember these details, but that was my answer at the time. I was like, I knew I wanted to make art. So anyway, so I finished law school. I really pretty quickly discovered that while I was in law school, I really didn't have time for art. So my grandiose plan of making pottery while I was in law school did not work out very well for me because just to do the law school curriculum took all of my energy and effort. I mean, it probably wouldn't have taken all my energy and effort if law school had been a natural thing for me, but because it was so unnatural and I was just fighting my nature, it just took everything out of me. So anyway, so I went and I finished, I got married, and then I was free to do whatever I wanted. And that's when I started pursuing all types of art. So I went way beyond pottery. I took drawing classes, painting classes. I was taking classes at a local community college, so it was very, very affordable, but it was also very high-level art classes. So I took Design 101, I took hand lettering. Taking my hand lettering course, that's when I discovered that there was a whole calligraphy society where I was living at the time, the Society for Calligraphy in Southern California. I started taking a lot of workshops with them. That's where I first learned bookbinding and hand lettering, and I was just so happy. I mean, I was so happy. This was before I had kids, and my nervous system was calm, and I was just living the life. And then after a few years, I really felt the urge to start having kids. My husband and I wanted to have a family, and we started having children. And that was when I realized, okay, this isn't all about me. I'm not going to be able to make art all the time. I'm going to have to figure out a new, different life for myself. I had my first child, and I felt a deep sense of being sort of unmoored from the pursuit of art. and the making, the creativity. But I had a child, and really pretty quickly after having my first daughter, I realized that, okay, while she was small enough, I could put her in a bouncy chair on our kitchen table and I could make art while she just watched, and, we hung out together, and she was just kind of like moving around in her little bouncy chair, and I was making art on the table. And at the time I got really into scrapbooking because that was a very natural thing to do. You have a child, you're taking pictures, you want to record all the moments. And I was just so happy, fell in love with scrapbooking. And then that scrapbooking sort of turned into me starting a printing company with another person. So I basically, for 15 years, owned and operated with someone else a printing company, and it was essentially paper arts. So that was when I spent just an incredible amount of time learning about paper, working with paper, and working with other people. And I would say my nervous system was regulated. I was working a lot with my hands because even though I was the owner of the company, there was still a lot of handiwork that I was doing. And my nervous system wasn't really an issue until about 15 years into the business, when I decided that I wanted to leave and my business partner and I needed to separate. And that was when the shit hit the fan again with my nervous system. And actually the sign that I had that I needed to leave and that I was done working in that business was I was waking up every morning for over a year in fight or flight. So if you've ever experienced this, it's like you open your eyes in the morning and inside of your body that whatever those stress hormones are, that cortisol, it's just racing. And it's a really weird phenomenon because it's like, who wakes up feeling like someone's chasing them? But that's what it's like to wake up already in fight or flight, already having a full anxiety response. So that was when I really started to realize, like, hey, anxiety is kind of this thing for me. I think when I had the irritable bowel syndrome, when I was in law school, I didn't really think, okay, Wendy, like, you're suffering from anxiety and you need to do something about that. It was really only my second major bout with anxiety where I was like, something's really not right here. So I got through that horrible period of my life, getting, settling the business and retiring out of that business. And I think, again, like, my awareness level for anxiety in my body and how it felt, I just had a much higher level of awareness. And pretty shortly, like within a few years of leaving that business, is when I realized, like a dummy, that there had been all of these online art courses that were available for people to take while I had my head in the sand working inside of this printing company for 15 years. A whole world of art education had become available online that people could do from their home. And it was at this time that I went and I got back out all my watercolor paints that I had used 20 years before, and all of my paper and my brushes and all of these things. And I started taking online art courses, and I was like right back in it, just like I had been in my early 20s when I started taking all of these art courses. I was just so happy. I was so drawn to this. But at the time, I did not understand the connection with the calming of my nervous system, with the regulation of my nervous system, because I hadn't read anything about it or heard anyone talking about it. I was just following what felt good to me. And I just got right back into making a lot of art and spending a lot of time at my dining room table, painting, hand lettering, just the repetitiveness of hand lettering. That is just absolutely wonderful. And then I was like, wow, there's really something. This is making me really, really, really happy. And it's a whole long story of how I ended up growing willow workshops and all that stuff. But the reason why I'm talking about this in a video is just to really express how much making art has allowed me to still be the person that I am today, to achieve at really high levels, to really live in the world, this very uncertain, very bizarro world that we're living in, with just crazy conflicts all over the world that, impact a lot of us personally. And to have a regulated nervous system while all of this is going on. It's pretty amazing. And I really attribute it to just the amount of hours that I spend creating with my hands and having those positive chemicals being released that combat the stress chemicals. So that's why I made this video. I just kind of wanted to let you guys in on who I am and why I do what I do. And it's truly the why of why I do everything. It's why I create, but also why I bring Willow workshops to life. It's because I know how powerful this is. And again, I'm not a doctor. I am not here to tell you to go off your medication and start painting. That's not what this video is about. This video is just me explaining how I've dealt with anxiety in my life, what I've learned, and how helpful this has been. So if you're watching this and you've never tried just working with your hands, and when I say working with your hands, I mean doing it pretty regularly, not just doing it once, but I mean making a regular practice of having a hobby or a passion that you love that involves handiwork. It could be slow stitching, you could be quilting. I mean, like I said, the list is really long of all the things that people love to do with their hands. Zen tangling. I mean, I love just even thinking of all of the wonderful things that people do that calm their nervous system. A pen and paper, a pencil and paper, it's all you need. It's the repetitiveness. And it's something about touching the materials. It's not going to be something you're going to get from watching someone else paint or watching someone else craft. It's only going to be gotten because you yourself are touching the materials. So I hope this video inspires you. And I'm going to speed up the rest of the painting. I hope that does not overstimulate your nervous system, but this video is going to be pretty long if I don't speed it up from here forward. So I hope that you enjoyed this and that you'll come visit me at willowwanders.com, where I have so many opportunities for you to work with your hands, get lost in the flow, and just relax your nervous system. Have a wonderful day.